I'm currently living at my mum's at the moment, and my mum, being a mum, listens to like mum radio, right? Which, if you're not familiar with BBC Radio 2, it's mum radio. They play old songs and they play like new songs which are deemed sanitary enough for mums, like country music or whatever. Now, there's a radio show on in the afternoons called Jeremy Vine, which is a British talk radio show hosted by the eponymous Jeremy Vine, where he just has like, I've encountered this before, but I've never been exposed to it on such a like long timeline. And he just has like absolutely deranged phone-ins, which of course at the moment are even more deranged than normal. Like he was inviting joggers and dog walkers to phone into his show and argue with each other over who should give who more space on the pavement as part of social distancing. And like dog walkers were phoning in to complain that they had been breathed heavily on by joggers who were running past. It's all like deeply normal. But then yesterday or the day before, he had some expert on and they were talking about basically how we're running out of ventilators, and at some point doctors might have to start deciding whose lives to save, right? And so then he goes like, well, one method that has been put forward is that we should save the lives of the people who are the most useful. Like if someone's a doctor, we should save their life first. And he's like, but now we're getting to the point where a hospital cleaner is looking more useful than a chief executive. And then there was just this really long pause as I imagined all the suburban mums slowly becoming Maoists.
Suburban mums hold up half the sky.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
And I did a viral tweet about it, and Jeremy started replying to me. And you know what? Maybe he'll come on the podcast. Who knows?
Yeah,
Inshallah.
Maybe. Hey, you know what? Jeremy Vine, come on the podcast and tell everyone they need to build pig iron smelters in their gardens. Fuck it. Why not? Hello and welcome back to this episode of TF. It's the free one. You know what it is. We're here with Sean and Andy from the Anti-Fada podcast. It's me, Milo, and Alice. How you guys doing?
Excellent.
Hey, we're doing great.
We are Corona casting from the Q zone.
Nothing bad happening over here.
Yeah.
The Q zone is what gets
Brooklyn.
activated when you smoke those really special cigarettes.
Just entirely protected against Captain Trips. Just podcasting.
Yeah, the Q Zone are the cigarettes that you buy from Bill Mitchell's special business that I'm pretty sure he's about to start. I found the best way, if you want to farm likes and get some dopamine, is to post a Steely Dan song in Bill Mitchell's mentions, and a bunch of like fascist boomers who love gentle adult contemporary will all just be like, yeah, Steely Dan. Hillary for prison. Hillary for prison. Steely Dan for my boombox. Thank you very much.
I forgot, Riley, that you have the gland that like makes you die when you don't get likes or attention.
Right.
Riley is a golden retriever. That's why he understands Matt Hancock so well.
The pineal gland is supposed to open up your consciousness to the world. Whatever gland it is that makes you into like a Twitter hungry fame psychopath is like the opposite of the pineal gland. Maybe the gonads or
Absolutely.
something.
Yeah.
Yo, so I was telling that bitch my pineal gland opens up my consciousness to the world.
Yeah, I was basically just like stimulating the ball sack that exists in my brain by posting Steely Dan songs under Bill Mitchell tweets. It rules.
As one does.
Anyway, I am glad to hear that you guys are doing well in Brooklyn, the epicenter of coronavirus and ethical coronavirus landlords, Brooklyn. No, but I'm once again glad to be hosting you guys. If you're listening to this and you haven't heard the Anti-Fada, great podcast. We've been on there a while ago. You should check it out. We were making jokes about the Lib Dems. But
it was a more innocent time.
As opposed to the Dem Libs, they're American cousins.
yes, of course. But so before we get into what we're going to be talking about, which is talking about some strike action, talking about doing a little bit of a reading series, which we haven't done in a while, I just want to applaud UK journalism as an institution for finally being willing to criticize the conservative government for its many catastrophic and manifold failures around testing anyone for coronavirus. All it took was thousands of preventable deaths. That's it.
And all it took was thousands of preventable deaths that could also apply to journalists. Like, the moment it was something that you can also die of when you're on the Guardian masthead, they're on it like that.
As soon as it turned out that you could get it from licking boots, they were fucking on the case.
You have to really thoroughly disinfect the boot first.
No, yeah, so even the Murdoch press, the Times, the Daily Mail and stuff, like they've actually like come out against the government for its failure to test. The only news institution still defending the government by cutting away to a weather report when Matt Hancock was about to be grilled by a journalist on why he hasn't tested anyone is the BBC. They're the only government loyalists left. And you know what? We salute them.
That's neutrality.
No, actually, I hear there's one magazine left.
Oh, we will get
to
it.
Come to later.
Sean and Andy, just for your edification, literally every single columnist who has defended like this government's failure to like institute proper testing, to stand up enough ventilators quickly enough, to voluntarily opt out of a European-wide ventilator purchasing scheme.
Because we missed an email.
Yeah. Has also been all of these journalists who have just like defended the government from scrutiny by the public. Wouldn't you know it? They're the same people who said going to war in Iraq was necessary. What are the odds?
That's interesting because in the United States, all the journalists and pundits and political figures who are responsible for, tens of thousands of American deaths and millions of Iraqi deaths, they're completely out of the picture now. That we just wiped them out with a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and they have no influence whatsoever anymore.
Okay, but to play devil's advocate here, if they had said and pushed for more testing or for there to not be an Iraq war, and then there was no Iraq war, and then we had tested people and we had prevented the coronavirus from spreading, no one would ever know, and people would just be mad at them for preventing the Iraq war, which we all thought was going to be fun, and having us stay inside when the coronavirus hadn't spread yet. So it's better for a journalist to support the bad thing and then retract later than to prevent the bad thing from happening.
Right.
Yeah, that's growth.
What about an alternate reality where we're really owned because like Iraq is now like incredibly fascist and rules the entire world, and we're like, damn, should have done that Iraq war.
Maybe Saddam was the new Hitler.
Bath Party Trash Future is such a strong bit. It's exactly the same, but we all have massive moustaches.
We're all wearing a lot of medals.
Yeah, it's
if Saddam nuked us, we wouldn't be in quarantine right now. So think about that.
Yeah. It's what you're talking about is the man in the high tacky marble mansion. But also, the interesting thing is like this doesn't track with like whether or not they were like an anti-Corbyn centrist, because like regardless of what you think of Marina Hyde, she's been on the right side of both these issues. So it's a different related mania that like they're just people who are addicted to being wrong with a huge fucking body count. And it's a real privilege to be able to interact with them on a daily basis and just have to stomach their thin-skinned unwillingness to accept criticism.
It's just the eternal sticky note of always do opposite of what Aronovich says, isn't it?
Yeah. It's been a really sad day for them, though, because it's Jeremy Corbyn's last day in office, and because they were too busy criticizing the government, they didn't have time for one last Jeremy Corbyn!
It's true. It kind of like passed without note. It was very funny. It's like, oh, this like Maoist threat to the free world is just like gone. They're just like, oh, okay.
What if Jeremy Corbyn wanted to nationalize the virus?
You joke, but there were a lot of people who were saying, oh, I bet Jeremy Corbyn would want to hear both sides of the coronavirus. It's like, why the fuck are you paid to muddy to think and write?
Yeah.
I wouldn't
Jeremy
trust you with a
Corbyn would have put
pencil.
the coronavirus on trial.
Hey, Jeremy Corbyn probably wants the coronavirus to be prime minister, in my opinion.
Jeremy Corbyn, R.I.P.
You know what? Give it a chance.
I want to talk about this. Mostly I want to talk about how the coronavirus has resulted in, or at least been the precipitating incident of, a wave of different kinds of strike action.
Mm.
In the UK, we've had cleaners doing a strike action in Lewisham Hospital because they're just not being paid at all. Like they were just their payment was being
classic
withheld.
Strike territory there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty fucked up that the entire British bourgeoisie just signed on to, yes, we will clap for the NHS and doctors and nurses, but not contract cleaners. This clap is not for you. They had to say that aloud into a megaphone before the clap.
Exactly. You actually clap in a Morse code, which tells you who it excludes.
Yeah, we've been clapping to applaud the health system. Not raising their wages or anything, but because we're cops and we're a nation of cops, your local area Facebook is now someone is keeping a tally on which streets have done well on clapping.
Oh, God, that sucks so bad. Good thing you're out
so
from under
bad.
the thumb of that tyrannical EU, huh?
Yeah, thank goodness.
Oh god, Britain is the worst kind of hell. Local, small town Britain, where there's a local busybody who's the fucking Gauleiter of the neighborhood who goes around deciding if you're patriotic enough. Oh man, it's intense. I would live in a Muslim no-go zone any day of the week over those motherfuckers.
Over the fucking Eastbourne local Facebook thing that's looks like this street hasn't been clapping very much. I bet they voted for Jeremy Corbyn.
Let's all go out in the street at 11 a.m. and do aerobics. No, thank you.
But yeah, so that's what's been going on. There have been waves and waves and waves of people clapping for the NHS who probably voted to destroy it. So thank you very much for your vibes, because that's all that counts politically, evidently. And this is more, Sean and Andy, this is more your turf. There has been revolts around the tech industry as well. I'm looking specifically at people who are in precarious contracts with companies like Instacart, who are now on strike indefinitely until they get more physical and financial protection from the grocery delivery platform. And at Amazon, where employees in 10 Amazon warehouses across the country have tested positive for COVID. And so workers in New York are now walking out to demand the company do more to protect them, which is very cool.
You know, you're in a period of heightened militancy when at the Amazon warehouse on Staten Island, some guy named Bobby Two Eyes Vafangul decided to come together with his coworkers and be like, you know what, we got no mask, fuck it, we're going on strike. It's a beautiful thing.
I'm having to wear gabagool as a mask.
I was struck very much by the video of the one Amazon guy on strike who was arguing entirely correctly, but very funnily also, that packages of dildos are not essential items.
Wait, I got this mask from a guy. He said he was an interior decorator, but his house looked like shit.
Yes. What a show.
For the first time in American history, the Italian Americans won't be breaking the strike.
Yes. Yes. Reconnecting with those Sopranos roots. But that's not all. I want to talk mostly about Amazon, but also it looks like the Northeastern Regional Council of Carpenters have announced a strike against non-essential construction work sites starting on Monday as well. So this is not just isolated to a couple of companies. It's not just isolated to high demand industries. It's not general yet, but there are multiple epicenters of not just labor strikes, but rent strikes also. And as you guys talk about this all the time, I kind of want to know if you could unpack that for us.
Well, I want to address the District Council of Carpenters situation because I am a union construction worker myself. And of all of the unions out there to start what could potentially be a general strike in the Boston metropolitan area based on COVID preparedness and PPE and protection, the United Brotherhood of Carpenters, that is such an incredible, momentous thing because the carpenters are known not just in Boston, but across the United States to be maybe the most conservative of all the business unions out there. But there's this really interesting dynamic because they come out of this AFL, Samuel Gompers type right-wing syndicalism, which usually is absolutely horrible.
Can you just explain that for our listeners?
Oh, sure. I didn't want to drone on with my usual history as a weapon shit, but...
No, come on, hit us.
All right. Part of the reason why, and this is really kind of this is a long history, but I'll try to make it short. One of the reasons why unionism is so different and weird and often backwards in the United States is because for the majority, starting in the 1870s, 1880s, the majority of workers here who were organized tended to be very skilled workers like carpenters, machinists, this, that, and the other. And this particular very American ideology arose that was a form of syndicalism. It said that workers need to use militant direct action and self-organization in order to gain what they can against the capitalist class specifically, right? It's a class struggle ideology. However, that pertains only to the people within our particular trade, within our particular industry. They didn't care about immigrant workers if they weren't part of the union. They didn't care about migrant workers. They didn't care about semi-skilled workers. This was, of course, most prominent coming from Samuel Gompers, who created the American Federation of Labor. It's a very, very sort of privatized welfare system within these particular very powerful and militant unions that is not a social unionism, it's a business unionism. So oftentimes, when it comes to a minimum wage struggle, the District Council of Carpenters in, say, New York City were fighting against a living wage in the city because other workers winning a higher wage, like $15 an hour, was bad for the carpenters because they couldn't give as many benefits then to potential workers coming in. It's a very backwards looking unionism, but that same tradition, that same tradition of right-wing syndicalism means that in Boston now, when the city and the state refuse to shut down non-essential job sites, which is, luxury high-rises, hotels, things that absolutely aren't essential to be building right now, when they're faced with a COVID outbreak, where going on those job sites to build shit for rich people might literally kill them and those around them. It's these sort of old craft unions with this long tradition of militancy that can stand up and have the power to stand up and say, shut it the fuck down, because they've been striking for 150 years. So in this weird way, the conservative business union is actually on the forefront now of saying, as an official union, not even as a wildcat thing, we will shut unsafe jobs down. Very interesting dynamic.
So it's both Mumsnet radio listeners in the UK and old unions in the US inexplicably now Maoists.
Well, if you're
that was the real Chinese virus all along.
No, it's just we have to trust the process, right? All of these people just playing the long game. Your mum listening to Radio 2, playing the long game to become a Maoist now.
If you want to be a materialist about it, right? If you think about when people embrace radical politics, in a lot of cases it's because they see that they have no current way out within the confines of what's acceptable. I think that one of the major reasons, this is probably not controversial, that millennial socialism is a concept even, is the fact that the defining events of our lives, the things that structured what we consider common sense, were essentially the Iraq War and the financial crisis. And so I think it's unsurprising that these people who are relatively traditionally conservative, but who've been made precarious, who've been put in danger by the world we live in and by the circumstances we live in, that, of course, it's natural for them to turn towards a more radical politics, which is, good.
Yeah, well, people find themselves
take it.
Yeah, asking things like, what is to be done? Things of that nature.
When every landlord gets a rent holiday and gets a mortgage holiday rather, and every tenant is being told they still have to pay up unless they meet 17 different means testing criteria, you begin to ask yourself, well, what's my landlord really doing for me?
The freedom that's always given to the working class is either to work or to starve, and it's been very easy to kind of paper over that because if your job really sucks and if you work for Whole Foods, for instance, which also has this potential strike wave coming, and Amazon buys it and lays off a bunch of people and makes your job way harder, you just have to do it because they'll just say, oh, if you don't like it, quit, go work somewhere else. But now there is no somewhere else. It's you have to keep working and you have to risk getting sick to do it, and you have to potentially make other people sick to do it, or you starve. And that's just the only option being given to all these now essential workers. We were just so used to making their lives harder and harder and harder And that's true for every essential worker job. Like truckers now have to work way more hours, like a dangerous number of hours longer. And there's just no option to stop doing it because they're essential workers. And even when they're talking about striking online, the comments are all people saying, how dare you not work anymore? Even though they're saying we want to keep working, but we want hazard pay, we want sick pay. So now it's becoming so obvious to everybody that your choice is to work or to starve. To everybody who's still working, that is. And
if I may play devil's advocate, if there's any group of people that I want at the wheel of vehicles which, weigh 10 tons or more and like are vital to the continuance of our civilization, I want those people to be really, really sleepy. I think that's an important thing. They should be as tired as possible.
We got to legalize speed for truckers. That's the only way to we can keep things moving.
I keep thinking about the text messages people have been like sharing with their landlord and stuff. And it really is true. There's no hiding place for this stuff anymore. There's no more superstructure. And like you can tell because just to circle back to the media for a second, like the only people still trying to do the superstructure stuff are the most feckless of all, the fucking BBC. Everybody
and the
else
Democrats and Labor and like Starmer's Labor.
Yeah, exactly. Useless peripheral people we can ignore.
Yeah. The Democrats do their strategy being live, laugh, love now with Nancy Pelosi's most recent
Joe
press
Biden's
release.
coronavirus strategy is like we're gonna defeat the virus together by togetherness with together by defeating the virus by coming together in order to defeat the virus. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. That's awesome.
right.
Biden's gonna change the virus to a fight with flick knives.
No, I've been thinking. Look, I've been talking about this for a while. I've been thinking like intrusive thoughts hourly about the Budweiser "What's Up" commercials.
We're all
and I think
handling
that's
quarantine very differently.
And we're all, I think we that's essentially the strategy is we're all going to say "what's up" to one another on the phone, and that's how we're going to beat the virus by coming together. It's the same thing with Labor, where they're just like, "Oh, when Starmer's leader, we're going to finger wag at all of your reckless spending." And it's like, yeah, the only reason they're still supporting the neoliberal consensus is that they're all losers.
Losers.
Very nasty people, very nasty guys.
Do you have the trend in England of politicians telling us to do mutual aid?
Very, very little. Like some in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon did a bit of that, and let's like go sign up and volunteer and stuff. But like by and large, no.
Yeah, and do mutual clap.
Yeah, the clap is as close as we've gotten to mutual aid, and even then, that's mostly because we can like call the cops on ourselves for not clapping enough.
Well, it's
you
all
don't
about
get the clap.
sniffy.
The hospitals are overburdened.
It's about sniffy bourgeois social performance, like the coming out of your house to clap thing, right? It's about showing how, because we're all in it together. The Blitz spirit. It's really just everyone's suffering and no one's groaning about it.
The bloody Queen is going to like address the nation. To say that pure.
The Queen is going to tell everybody in Britain to stay hydrated. Wash your hands.
She's just going to go out there and be like, "I've COVID, bazinga."
I want to talk a little more about Amazon, because there is a lot has come out about this. That Amazon has fired the lead organizer, a guy called Chris Smalls, or at least one of the organizers, who's now been painted as the lead in the media, was fired on the basis that he was, quote, flouting rules around self-isolation. And it just so happens that he was a leading figure of the Amazon union movement. What are the chances?
To be fair, Amazon have been really ahead of the curve on self-isolation because each of their workers works in a little individual cage, which is a really good safety feature.
But no, so basically, to start this story, Amazon is keeping people working in tight conditions with insufficient safety gear. The same exactly what you'd expect Amazon to be doing. And it's all being defended by a bunch of former Obama administration fucking freaks and vampires.
Jay Carney, who used to be Obama's press secretary, is now Amazon's, I think, like SVP of public relations.
And doing straight union busting.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
So
of course, they're not even good at it because they can't keep a fucking secret. And so immediately, within 5 minutes of Jay Carney replying to Bernie with, actually, he was violating the coronavirus protocols, someone who was in that meeting, and I'm not picturing a mysterious Jay Carney-shaped informant here, leaked to fucking everybody the minute in which Amazon's head of legal was just like, hey, this guy, he's not so smart, he's not so articulate, let's smear him. And that's almost verbatim.
Yes, let's union bust. Anyone want a union bust?
Union busting is when I masturbate on company time.
Here is his side. He wrote this and published it in The Guardian. I think American Guardian, because the British Guardian would probably be on Jay Carney's side.
They'd be too busy checking his genitals.
I decided to start spreading awareness among the workers in the building.
Oh, this is Chris Small's side, not Jay Carney's.
Yeah, Chris Smalls, yeah. I have meetings in the common areas, and dozens of workers joined us to talk about their concerns. People were afraid. We went to the general manager's office to demand that the building be closed down so it could be sanitized. We wanted to be paid during the duration of that time. And another demand of ours was that people who can't go to work because of underlying health conditions be paid. Number one, Bezos has done so much for us. How dare they?
So this guy who is like not that smart, not that articulate, apparently, just has a fairly reasonable set of grievances here, right?
Yeah.
But he does not have a communications degree.
Exactly. He should have got one of those before he started thinking about He needed the Pod Save Johns to like workshop the can you sanitize the fucking distribution center.
Can we do some bets on which one of the Pod Johns is going to end up being like a union busting CEO within the next 5 years?
I mean, I think they all are going to. I'm surprised that like Pod Save America hasn't like had Jay Carney on to talk about the abuse he's received from Chris Smalls and Bernie Sanders.
Let's give them some credit though; they're not the Young Turks.
So, Alice, you mentioned this call. Here is what the lawyer actually said. We should spend the first part of our response. Remember, this is the response to someone who's saying, hey, we don't want to die to continue working so we don't starve, right? During a global pandemic where we have been marked as essential workers. Here is what their response was. We should spend the first part of our response strongly laying out the case for why the organizers' conduct was immoral, unacceptable, and arguably illegal in detail, and only then follow with the usual talking points about worker safety.
Yeah, the trouble was the way he organized the strike failed to believe women.
I mean, if you get a law degree and you use it to say a sentence like, we should spend the first part of our response strongly laying out the case for why the organizers' conduct was immoral, unacceptable, and arguably illegal in detail, then you should be absolutely disbarred by, like, I'm struggling to find a way to phrase this.
Also, surely they're just doing the PR person's job.
So the Amazon people continue. Make him the most interesting part of our story, and if possible, make him the entire face of the entire union organizing movement. Well, you know what, Amazon? Congratulations, you did it. You've made this organizer who you have basically like publicly decided to do a smear campaign of union busting against the face of the organizing movement because everyone's seen how much you basically don't care if your workers live or die when you put the choice to them to either, work and don't starve, but also probably die from coronavirus.
I love the idea of them just making him the most interesting part of the story by just making him sound really interesting. Like, oh, did you hear these? He was the third man ever to climb Everest, and he's actually read every single German published book in existence.
Usually crucifying someone just makes them go away forever.
Did this meeting fucking take place in the Republican National Convention castle from The Simpsons?
Oh, hit me with that thunder, please. So obviously, the Amazon guy did some damage control here, right?
Of course.
The lawyer said his comments were, quote, personal and emotional.
He had a heated gaming moment.
Small lawyer. Small bean lawyer.
Just like taking off the gaming headset and like throwing it at my mounted law degree.
He's the Logan Paul apology video after the infamous Japanese hanging incident.
Yes. Yeah.
Sean and Andy, I want to throw to you guys again. What do you make of this as union busting tactics? Saying, "I'm sorry, I busted a union. I've been under a lot of pressure right now at home."
Yeah, it's an emotional time for all of us. Who's among us has not wanted to bust a union on these difficult days? Yeah, like kind of branching off what Andy was talking about before, with workers now deemed essential directly facing their conditions. What's happening at Amazon and Instacart and Uber and all these other quote unquote gig economy jobs is the culmination of 30, 40 years of the undermining and the hollowing out of American labor law. Because remember, these workers are in these precarious positions, not just for like economic reasons, but because corporations have tried for decades and succeeded in doing things like undermining the power of the National Labor Relations Board, which is supposed to rule on things like Jay Carney firing a guy for alleged safety violations when it's really just a union busting thing. The NLRA is supposed to come in and say like, no, actually that's illegal. You have to reinstate him. You're blocking union activity. The NLRB doesn't really do that much anymore. So Jay Carney and people like that at Amazon and elsewhere have been able to get away for so long with doing things like they did to Chris Small, union busting in various ways, that they're shocked now that because this is in the headlines and because these workers are so needed, that all of a sudden they can't get away with it like they used to. I mean, of course, Carney was particularly stupid. In the minutes of this meeting, he should have said at the end, "Don't leak the minutes of this meeting." But still,
if you say that, they can't leak it.
Yeah.
It's
like, are you a cop?
You had to ask every.
Yeah. You just do the like boomer Facebook thing. You're like, under the Treaty of Rome, I do not give permission for any of my content to be shared by the like World Health Organization.
I love that fucking some Obama administration just fucking scumbag trying to get a DMCA takedown because he said it's actually a song that he was writing.
Whoever leaked this meeting is the third instance in this episode of like just somebody just turning Maoist, of going Maoist mode.
Some member of the board of directors.
Yeah.
What? It's kind of
just
surprising.
Like some Amazon like fucking attorney or something just wearing the Mao hat in the meeting.
It's kind of surprising that Jay Carney is taking the heat for this, because like I remember maybe this time last year they had this like army of fake Amazon picker employees.
Oh,
who had
yeah.
Twitter accounts.
The ambassadors.
They would just respond to every comment saying, "Oh, that's not true. I'm a woman of color with 5 children and I love Amazon. Every day I love Amazon." And it's just like very fake, but I guess that was their that's their strategy for everything. It's just like automate everything, robotize everything. If we still have to use humans in some way, just try to like gamify it as much as possible so they stop like thinking and acting like humans until eventually we can replace them. But now they've reached a point where it's like, well, they ran out of time. They weren't able to replace these essential workers with robots. So they have no other option than just work them to death. Because if they make things better for these workers, then they're just going to have to like stay better, and they won't be able to have an excuse to replace them with robots whenever they have the chance. So they're in this awkward situation where they're like, oh, I guess you guys do have to die to work here. I don't know what else to tell you.
You don't have to die to work here, but it helps. I, for one, think it's extremely good PR when I have employees lined up saying, I really like my job at Amazon. I do not understand the grievances of the other workers. I would also like to clarify that my family are not being held against their will.
Well, also, it's like, one of the greatest assets the American labor movement has in this time of its precarity is that its enemies are like the Jay Carneys of the world.
Yeah, they are so dumb.
Just massive simpletons who've been tricked into thinking that they're smart by Ivy League schools and rules.
Well, the tech industry in particular has been a way to either arbitrage labor or to undermine labor protections. Like you saw that with the move from cab drivers to Uber drivers, right? And they're so fucking stupid. These people are so dense and dumb and full of stupid fucking degrees that like all these libs out in Silicon Valley, like Carney, who are their spokespeople, don't even realize what they've done. They think they're being efficient and innovating. They don't even realize they're not even smart enough to realize that they fucked over millions and millions of American workers, and they should probably keep that quiet, you know?
Yeah. They're proud of it.
They're proud of it.
Well, of course, they've gotten cookies for it thus far, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like everything that they've done in their entire lives has led them to the belief that this is a success. This is what success looks like. You should brag about that success, and everyone will be very pleased with you.
Listen, you people are all dinosaurs. You probably eat pizza that wasn't made in the back of the delivery van.
Oh god, ambulance is a fucking growth. Is going to be doing so well out of this.
I'm going to close this section by saying one more thing that this Amazon doofus has said. This is their general counsel. I let my emotions draft my words and got the better of me. That's right. It was an emotion. It was an emotion-involved union busting.
No, that's literal. There's an app that translates your emotions into business actions.
There's a really important underlying and historical dynamic to understand in this moment, because it's not just that the contradictions, as it were, are becoming heightened. It's not just that tens of millions of people who were basically said that they were detritus are now considered to be essential to the working of the economy. It's not just that it's all hands on deck, right, for those people, and they're working egregious, crazy hours just to keep society running. It's also a real coming to terms with the kind of labor market, the kind of economy that the United States has created over the last 40 years or so. These precarious workers in these independent contractor or gig type jobs have been on their way to a complete penury for years and years and years, and it's been getting worse. One thing, however, that gives me some hope is that, and this is going to be very controversial, right? But if you look at the dynamic with these like semi or unskilled workers who are highly replaceable, who are highly mobile, across the economy and geographically, it is a very, very, very similar situation to what you saw in the late 19th and early 20th century with militant social industrial unions arising, similar to the industrial workers of the world.
Bringing the Wobblies back.
It's Wobbly time. So people think that the Wobblies were good just because they were militant. They think that the Wobblies arrived sui generis, deus ex machina, with this kind of militant communist unionism. But what the IWW reflected and why they became so popular and so powerful after 1905 was they represented workers who were, similar to gig workers, disposable and replaceable and highly precarious. We're talking about lumberjacks, who have to move around from place to place and get a job wherever the work was possible, most of them immigrants. Miners, which was a very, very dangerous...
skate around with butter on their feet on a gigantic skillet.
You're talking about longshoremen, who before the growth of those unions was a very dangerous, precarious, low-paying industry. The thing that made the IWW was that these workers who were on the margins, who were on the edges of the capitalist economy, became super central to that, and they started to realize their strength and their power. And a mobile, militant, industrial unionism was the way that you could take your red card from being a lumberjack in the wintertime to go pick tomatoes in the summertime and go be a longshoreman in the fall time while keeping your rights as a working class person. So I don't see any reason why, except for ideology and the power of the ruling class, that coming out of this, gig workers could not create something that looked like a very agile and a very militant and potentially very powerful new kind of wobbly type movement right now.
Well, we're already seeing traces of that, like groups like the IWGB.
I was going to say the IWGB.
Even like the IVW, the IWW itself still is like a thing, and they're still trying to organize exactly those kind of precarious workers. So yeah, who can say? We don't know, but that would be Yeah, I think we can see some kind of like stirrings of that. And the thing is that this is one of those weeks where decades are happening. So by the time this comes out, this will be all completely woefully out of date. And yeah.
Oh yeah. All of the unions will have like been taken in by like Enoch Powell from the moon. It'll suck.
Or just gone straight Maoist.
I've had a realization recently about, I think, why all the jobs are so shit. Because some like real heads of the show will know this. I went to business school kind of as a joke, and what I realized was the real joke was on me because business school is nonsense. But what I did
Why did
learn
I
at
spend
business school,
£700 on this Joker face makeup?
they didn't give me anything of that higher dollar value. No, the really like useful thing I learned at business school is like how insane all of the principles like the modern economy are founded on. And one of the things we were like, one of our lecturers was like a jumped up former management consultant, and she was really into like all of this like Japanese management consultancy bullshit where like you take like a basic concept like not wasting shit and then give it a Japanese name and charge people like $400 an hour to explain it to them. Anyway, and so but what's happened with all these companies have been introducing all this like Japanese don't waste anything shit that kind of works in Japan because the Japanese are really organized, but in the West just makes everything shitty. They're just like, oh well, having loads of workers is waste, so we're just going to fire like 40% of the workers and make the rest of the workers do all the jobs. And also having any inventory is waste, so we're not going to keep any inventory, and then if there's any spikes in demand, I guess we're in a crisis. And like you just
letting your workforce get the coronavirus is exactly like that Japanese thing where you break the cup and then you solder it back together.
Well, I think the great analog to that is we're seeing the results of the United States healthcare system, where we've been doing just-in-time medicine for the last 20 years with no reserves of ventilators or doctors or nurses.
Or like creeping privatization in the UK, where we have like 30 ventilators that we just built, and the BBC newsreader kind of had a panic attack live on the air when she realized it said 30 and not 30,000.
That was so funny.
Yeah.
She's like, hang on, sorry, are my eyes deceiving me?
And then she's like, oh, wait a minute. No, of course. The government said 30.
The
It was
BBC
only ever going to do 30.
rules
It hit its goal.
so much. If you wanted to know what it's like to sit through like state broadcasting in a really shit dictatorship, that's exactly what it is right now.
Yeah. The BBC newsreader just going, wait, does that say 30? And then just Swan Lake comes on the TV.
Yo, all right. Here's the thing. I want to, with the time we have left, I'd like to move on to doing something we haven't done in a while. We are about to do a reading of an article by Toby Young,
friend of the show.
Everybody's favorite free school moron. The guy who, if you'll remember, got fired from his like university industry sinecure because he couldn't stop like tweeting about like wanting to fuck people in the ass
and like secret eugenics meetings, which sounds much cooler. Well, not cooler, but like more aesthetically evil than it probably was, where it was just a bunch of like sad bald nerds in a room together being like, actually, I think my brain pan's quite good.
Yeah. I would describe Toby Young, if you're not familiar with him, as a samurai of the mind. Like, he truly has one of the most powerful brains to ever be created. There is nothing he won't think. There is no, like, the one thing I'll always say about Toby Young, which is amazing, is that whenever he's in the news for any reason and they contact his friends for, like, comment, they all go on the record, but only to say, I am not friends with Toby Young.
You know what Toby Young is? You know those memes where there's, like, the guy with the, like, giant brain that's, like, drawn into a shape? The shape there is like the samurai helmet with the horns.
I don't know what Toby Young sounds like, but he looks like a Mark Proch character.
Oh, I can do Toby Young.
Well, the thing that you've got to bear in mind with this kind of measure is that how big will it make your dick?
So he has written this article in a new like apolitical commentary magazine that has run called The Critic.
Yeah, the ISIS to unheards Al Qaeda.
It has run columns recently, including the title, Twitter trolls disprove the myth of intrinsic goodness. A masterful tombstone for a Tudor bruiser, and men beware women.
So the creators of this magazine saw Quillette and were like, "Wait, hold my beer."
Yes, yes.
Well,
What
they've
if we
only
did
just discovered
Quillette,
that
but, like,
women
with
be
less-
shopping, and they need to warn you.
What if we did Quillette, but with like just less mask offness and more of just the answer to
Simpering
every problem
Britishness.
being community? Yeah, it's simp Quillette. So, of course, Toby Young has written an article entitled "Has the Government Overreacted to the Coronavirus Crisis?"
Yeah, sure, why not?
Why? Cool. You could say, have the police overreacted to the coronavirus crisis by just inventing new laws by which to detain people? Sure. Has the Home Office overreacted to the coronavirus crisis by putting migrants in detention centers where they're almost certain to get coronavirus? Absolutely. But has the government overreacted to the coronavirus crisis by, like, stopping the economy for a little while and giving people free money? Toby Young is going to say yes.
It's been
So,
very bad with the
let's begin.
police because previously I used to get away with saying I was English by coughing as I said it, but now that only makes things worse.
So let's begin the article. Like a growing number of people, I'm beginning to suspect the government has overreacted to the coronavirus crisis. So
how much growing? Growing,
So
like...
Growing number of divorced people.
So here's the thing. That's good writing. If you pose a question in the headline, you should answer it in the first line. Has the government overreacted to the coronavirus crisis? Yes.
Well, not even yes, but many people are saying it's being
Yes.
talked about more and more.
I think
I'm not-
I think it's empirically a shrinking number because for months people thought it wasn't a big deal, and now people are beginning to realize it is. So how can that be changing?
Listen, a lot of people are saying it. Beautiful people. Very smooth heads.
Coronavirus response no longer hot.
Toby Young experiences the world purely in relation to Toby Young. So his brain resets every morning.
The
But let's
number
get
of
into it.
voices in his head are growing by the day, like Akira.
And they all have the same irritating voice.
Okay.
He surveyed
Okay,
one
okay.
person, Toby Young, and it returned a result of 100%.
So, if we accept the statistical modeling of the team at Imperial College, spending £350 billion to prolong the lives of just a few 100,000 mostly old people is an irresponsible use of taxpayer money. There it is!
You are a demon, right at the top.
A
You're a
few
demon.
100,000.
A few 100,000, mostly elderly.
100,000.
Mostly.
Only
That
a few
mostly-
100,000.
That mostly does a lot of work.
and a few.
is,
a few 100,000. Like 3 or 4.
A mere.
It has a deeply Hermann Goering at his Nuremberg trial vibe.
No, you know what it is? It's Dr. Strangelove. I'm not saying that we won't get our hair mussed, but I'm talking 10, 20 million tops.
It's funny because we're going to start measuring coronavirus deaths literally in megadeaths. You know, what megadeath was created for, which is 1 million deaths. We haven't started using that sort of quantitative shit since the Cold War, but now we're going to be talking about corona megadeaths. We're back, baby.
Oh,
Sweet.
I thought we were going to use the band Megadeth. I don't know how many people are in that, but I figured it might
okay.
not be as convenient a unit.
So, let's get into the article. Because where Toby Young basically says, using taxpayers' money to preserve the lives of taxpayers? Shocking. That may sound cold-hearted.
Yeah.
No, it sounds dumb as hell. But this isn't a straightforward trade-off between public health and economic health, because people are killed by economic downturns just as surely as they are by pandemics. Yep. It's
Must-
the
What are we going to do
downturn-
about that, Toby?
Must preserve line.
It's the downturn that does it. No, none of the relationships that exist around the context of the downturn. Nope. When GDP goes down, people just drop dead for no reason.
So wait, is Toby Young, free market libertarian, just advocating for a planned economy here because economic downturns kill people?
The only way, as we know, to keep economic crises from happening is abolishing capitalism. So he's clearly on it.
Maoist count up to 4.
Toby Young just thinks that under normal circumstances, the main deaths are when the economy crashes and just like stockbrokers jump out of their windows.
Yeah, that's it.
Those guys were my friends.
My last ones.
There's only two ways to die in the Toby Young mind palace. It's stockbroker jumping out of window or regrettable old person.
Toby
like,
can only say that dead people are his friends, otherwise it's libel.
I also like the thing he's doing here as well, which is like, that's it. You know, it's you couldn't possibly have done anything else about it. Everything had to happen the way that it did. No other choices could have been made. He's basically a Calvinist without being too dumb to realize it. Anyway, he goes into some like 2 pages worth of calculations, which is basically just scholasticism, angels dancing on the head of a pin shit.
Wheeling out my actuarial tables here to look at exactly how many thousands of old people will die.
Yeah, if there's one thing we associate Toby Young with, it's mathematical and statistical mastery.
So he says, at the simplest, the government has valued every human life at £1,521,740, which is 350 billion divided by 230,000, the amount of people that we're trying to save by locking down.
Showing you're working. Very good, Toby.
Yeah, I also love that.
Star.
Yeah, it doesn't seem ridiculous to like have that 40 in there. Like what? Like the fact that it is as precise to the pound as 740 should show you that measuring human life with a currency is just not a concept that works.
Just knock off the 40, and then you have like a human life. Plus, you can get FIFA.
This article is already it has to turn like millions of people into Chris Arthur value form theorists with how perverted and twisted it is that this commodity logic is inserted into the worth of a human life. This article has to create thousands or hundreds of thousands of left comms.
Just the armchair growing around me as I read.
By this logic, there is a certain monetary value that would be worth the obliteration of all life on Earth. Otherwise, at some point, you have to decide that no value of money is going to be worth this particular action. It contains that contradiction there at the end of it.
People, so 7 billion multiplied by, and what did he say? 1 million. 521,740. Yeah, so for merely $1.06522E15 or pounds, by that point it doesn't matter. We could just obliterate all human life.
Oh, and also this is one more reason to make the money machine go burr. Because if we could inflate the cost of a human life, these ruling class ghouls might not be as likely to fucking get us killed.
That's true, yeah. Just walking around the warehouse, like, you have to sanitize it, because if I die, you owe somebody, like the universe in the abstract, about $1 billion.
Literally the gods of the market.
That's why Bezos... Yeah, it's basically like tossing people into a volcano so the market doesn't get mad at you. Like, this is one of the reasons that the movie Apocalypto is probably one of the most prophetic ever made.
I just love the idea of the invisible hand of the market just reaching down, but it's doing the, like, rubbing its fingers together to indicate money.
I mean, you guys are saying this is ridiculous, but the next time you're planning like a vacation to the Portuguese coast and you're trying to decide between a 3- and 4-star hotel and you're checking your bank account, you're gonna be like, I kind of wish we rubbed off some more pensioners.
Yeah, I could have an extra $1 million in there easily. Harold Shipman must have been so fucking rich.
So basically, here's the methodology he's doing this
literally is just the Venn diagram circle of Toby Young and Harold Shipman. Like, they're old. We're going to save the health service some money.
Here is the logic by which Toby Young is sort of making this calculation. He basically says, look, that each life actually ought to be valued at about £500,000, so about 1/3 of what the government currently is doing.
That math I did, forget about it. You're worth less than that.
He does say here, now reader, I think you're worth more than that, winky emoji.
Yeah, the girl reading
It's
this.
worth more. The girl, yeah.
So here's the logic that he uses. He says the National Institute for Clinical Excellence, or NICE, places a value of up to £30,000 on each quality-adjusted life year, or QALY. So how many QALYs will the government be adding to those people whose lives would otherwise be lost to coronavirus if the lockdown hadn't been imposed?
QALY was a much
spending.
darker Pixar film about a little robot that has to decide who lives and who dies.
Love to imagine a Logan's Run future where somebody's going to off me when I get too many QALYs.
But that's what QALYs is like a common concept when you're doing economic analysis of social policy. It's like regrettable it exists, but it's not something Toby Young's invented.
It's the thing
common.
that like Sarah Palin called death panels, right? Is that if
like,
you have to ration how much you're spending on care, then eventually you have to be like, this thing costs too much for too little benefit. It's not inherently sociopathic. He's just making it so.
Well, basically, it's like battlefield medicine and triage is not inherently sociopathic. What's inherently sociopathic is doing it when it's not necessary to do so, because you have to
that's
maintain
just
the
eugenics,
illusion,
which is Toby's favorite thing.
Because you have to maintain the illusion that literally everything is currency fungible, and like this is why the concept of QALYs just gets the eugenics set so stiffed up. Is because it's like, well, we can decide when the state should off you because you're no longer worth keeping alive. Like, the fact that it's a crisis doesn't really bear on the logic of, are you worth keeping alive or not? And it goes back to, at what point is it profitable to just, obliterate the earth?
Yeah, and that's exactly it, right? Like, they love to pretend that this is objective. The doctors, the people at NICE who, come up with this stuff know for a fact that it isn't. That's why you have arguments about medical ethics.
Changing the group DM chat now.
It's just a bunch of toothless guys.
Yeah.
Just, I'm not sure this meth is very ethical.
But all I'm saying is that this stuff is mutable. It is not considered to be objective by any practitioner in any of the related fields. It only a big fucking brain samurai like this could be like, if that's what a human life is worth, then I simply plug that into my big calculator, and there's how many old people should die.
I'd just like to point out how I intuited the overlap between this magazine and Quillette when we see now that QALYs are a eugenicist methodology.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say you knocked it out the fucking park there. But actually, I wanted to throw back to you guys as well, just to again, if you just to unpack this a little more, kind of from the Antifada labor standpoint as well.
Not necessarily from the labor standpoint, but I'd say from more like a sociological standpoint. What Toby Young is trying here in the UK was tried several weeks ago in the United States by pundits on the conservative right, many libertarians, people at Reason Magazine, and even some liberals and many CEOs talking about how it's not worth the economic damage. It's not worth the quote unquote deaths that would come from an economic downturn in order to shut the economy down. What these people are facing for the first time in their stupid fucking lives is a situation that there is no technical fix for. This isn't an either or thing, because you either socially isolate people now, socially distance people now, so you flatten the curve and make less deaths happen now, or you let the thing run its course. Either which way, the economy is going to shit. Do you think the US or UK or Chinese or any economy is going to be thriving? It's going to go back to quote unquote normal if you've just got 100,000 people dropping dead every fucking day in workplaces and on the streets all over the country? These people can't understand it, that there's no option. There's no option here between saving the economy and saving people's lives from coronavirus.
But I think some of these people are also kind of prescient that the economy has thrived for forever, but especially for the last few decades, on making death and the devaluation of human life very normal. With just with the creeping up of the retirement age, for example, Like it's normalizing more the idea that once you retire, your life no longer has any value, or if you can't work or you're on welfare, like you're a parasite on the economy. And basically the economy, the vitality of the economy becomes what's most important. Right. So when people are thinking about ventilators, they're thinking about it in terms of ventilating the economy, keeping the economy breathing. And keeping people breathing is only useful if we're talking about workers. If we're talking about people who will work at a continued rate of exploitation.
Because also when you're talking about keeping the economy going so people don't die, what you're actually talking about is making the continued existence of workers as like living people still profitable for the uber wealthy. That's actually what you're talking about, because when the economy contracts...
How many lives are saved by us maintaining the divine right of kings? If we lose that, then, how many people might die of like hopelessness that there isn't a king ordained by God?
Slave owners had a direct material incentive for keeping the slaves alive by feeding them enough and housing them and giving them clothes. Whereas capitalists, they don't care. They let the social reproduction be outsourced to outside of the workplace. Slave owners actually care about slaves because they're their property, which is literally what slave ideologists were saying in the South in the 1850s and 1860s.
I'm just imagining the tweet now, like the kind of like the moral landlord, like the moral slave owner. Like, well, I actually feed my slaves pretty well, and I'd like to see them feed themselves that well.
You don't have to imagine that. That's literally what the argument was.
That's a real guy. That's a lot of guys.
That's a real guy. That was a real person.
He now owns a jet ski dealership.
And the analog here about the idea that just the economy contracting is fatal for people because imagines that the economy is just some kind of god and we can appease him by throwing QALYs into a fucking volcano until we get enough tokens back that say, yes, fine, you've killed enough retirees, have a wider TV.
Ironically, they are killing off their own voter base.
So I'll carry on here. Well, that's the thing also, Milo, they're not killing off their own voter base because their voter base is not just old people, it's wealthy older people.
But it's also because, like, voting is done. Like, whatever you think of it, voting is not a thing that matters anymore. But, like, I think also we can talk about, like, I know I keep bringing this back to the press, but journalists are the stupidest people on earth. And so it's been very funny watching them be the slowest on the uptake of this. And so I forget which BBC journalist it was, but one of them said, "Oh, well, of course the Conservative Party wouldn't want to like endanger elderly people because that's really their base. It would be immensely unpopular with them." And I remember reading that and thinking, "Oh, you sweet summer child."
No one will murder me because that would be illegal.
So some people reading this will think, I bet Toby Young changes his tune if he gets the virus. But in fact, I did get the virus. No. I became symptomatic.
Libs.
I became symptomatic 7 days ago. I've been bedridden ever since, and I'm now anxiously waiting to see if the disease spreads to my lungs. But I'm 56.
Now feels like a 19th century Gothic novel. I anxiously await to see if the pestilence will spread onto my lungs.
The most Toby Young thing would be to get coronavirus in order to win a theoretical argument with libs.
He says his odds are good because he has no underlying health conditions and he's 56. So prayers up for Toby. But if the government followed my advice and it turns out by the time I require urgent care that the NHS cannot accommodate me, I won't regret writing this. Yeah, you will. Yes, you absolutely fucking will.
No, you're right. He won't regret writing it because no one will have read it anyway. He knows that him writing this has no influence on the situation. The only people that read this is us.
You know what it reminds me of is Christopher Hitchens' atheism when he was dying, of being like, well, yeah, you say that you're not scared, but nobody can fucking prove you wrong once you die, right? So who gives a shit? You just been like, yeah, you just left this behind of being like, no, actually I was right. And then get owned immediately.
Yes, I probably have at least 20 years of healthy living ahead of me, so my life is worth more than £500,000.
I don't know about that.
So he's
Toby.
like, actually, you're owned because I am worthwhile. So they would have to save me because of logic.
If I got the coronavirus, I would simply survive.
You know, there's always like the obverse to the bourgeois ideology, and in this case, I think we need a people's QALY or like a proletarian QALY, which rates how much people are worth based on their class position. And in that case, Toby Young's life is worth way less than $500,000 quid.
Yeah, we adjust for like number of columns written.
I love to think that Toby Young wrote this whole article and got to the bottom and then worked out and was alarmed that his life was only worth £500,000 and then went back to the bit where it said 1.5 million and just added in, but let's call it 500,000.
Who's counting? What's a QALY between friends?
Yeah, I love to like get the coronavirus and have a doctor like judge whether or not I get a ventilator by like how many columns I might possibly produce in the future. Like, no, the risk is too high. She might get a Guardian column.
So,
yeah.
That's the thing.
Doctor, we have to save him. He's achieved the rank of brain samurai.
Is it worth spending $185 billion to save people who might only have a few years left? Nor is it worth a 15% drop in GDP, which will result in even a greater loss of life.
Just attempting to balance perfectly the like stockbrokers going out of windows and the people dying for lack of ventilators.
Because all of that has to happen. All of history is just one damn thing after another.
It's as if to say, because you know, there's going to have to be these triages of who gets a ventilator and who doesn't. It's as if he's saying, like, why didn't we always have this? Why are we just starting this triage system now? This is great.
You know what eugenicists do? You know what eugenicism is doing? It is tying the people to the tracks in front of the trolley. You can then be like, it's so regrettable that you have to make this decision, but you fucking put them there.
Yeah, if we'd invested money in getting ventilators at an appropriate time, how many people would have been killed because the government spent too much money on ventilators
Snidely
and they couldn't
fucking
go to their job at the
whiplash.
Amazon Web Services factory?
I like standing there going like, well, this state-run trolley isn't coming on time. Better privatize it.
Sorry, you're saying?
Yeah, so like if we were to have a 3% mortality rate in the United States from COVID, if we just let the thing go, you're talking about the deaths of about 10 million Americans, which is what Toby's arguing, right? He's saying just open it all up, let it run its course. 10 million people will die, but it'll be worse if we shut the economy down and see a 15% drop in GDP, which will result in a greater loss of life. That is literally not true. And we're seeing why it's not true right now, because you've got this core of essential workers right now doing the trucking, doing the logistics, making the food, making the supplies, doing sanitation, you know, all the important things it takes to let society like continue and survive. Those people are working and everybody else isn't. The reason why people die in an economic downturn is because, like Andy was saying earlier, our lives and not starving are tied directly to a wage, tied to the wage relation. All of that's up in smoke now. It's gone. Nobody can work anymore. So actually, why do tons of people have to die if there's an economic collapse? If we continue to feed them, right? If we give them a UBI, if we take care of people in a way that we haven't before. I think the idea that 10 million people would die, you know, in a downturn is completely absurd at this moment when we should be taking heroic measures with like a $2 trillion fucking bailout of the economy.
Yeah,
So,
but then that would disincentivize them to take horrible slave jobs later.
Yeah, why are you untying people from these trolley tracks? That takes away from my beautiful moral choice that I've created for you here.
What you're untying people from this trolley tracks, but what if the trolley tracks fly away when you don't have people tied to them?
Yeah,
It's Toby Young with the NPC mask over the really angry Wojak underneath with the lever in his hand.
I'm just like
never
stood on
been
a
a
platform
war.
waiting hours for a southern train that's delayed because Toby Young's doing one of his moral thought experiments again.
just derailing it into like siding after siding after siding.
All right, I think that's as good a point as any to end. But before we do, I want to say, number one, thank you so much, Sean and Andy, for coming on. And to everyone listening, you should check out the Antifada. Check them out on Twitter.
Andy's
check
book.
them out where you find podcasts. And Andy, you had a book coming out.
Yes, buy my book.
Buy the book.
It's out
Buy the
April
book.
20th. It's called I Want to Believe, UFOs, Posadas, Apocalypse Communism, or something like that. It's buy it in all the bookstores that are open.
Buy multiple copies of it.
Yeah, buy multiple copies and build yourself a 2-meter radius of the book.
No, you can get it on. You can get it at plutobooks.com and use code Posadas20 for a 20% discount.
Boom.
Build a big target for the aliens to shoot nuclear weapons at us with.
We need them now more than ever.
Real quick plug also, I have started to do what Trash Future, our comrades, have done before us, which is to Twitch stream. I just taught Andy how to use OBS and to Twitch stream himself. You can find our podcast wherever podcasts are sold and where they're free, but you can find our Twitch at twitch.com/theantifada. We'll be doing about 1 or 2 a week.
Oh hell yeah. Okay, nice. Let's get on each other's streams, play some fucking games.
Damn, let's cross streams. Bitch.
Hell yeah, baby.
Also, we have t-shirts. If you would like a hot Trash Future t-shirt, very hot. It's very now. They've been designed by Matt Lubchansky, friend of the show, actual friend of the show, unlike Toby Young. And they're very cool. There's a link in the description with pictures and
cover
details
your
of
shame.
how to order one. Yeah, we ship internationally, so if you're in Venezuela, order a shirt.
I was on the cover of a local newspaper today wearing one of those shirts.
Oh yeah.
Oh hell yeah.
Sick.
Can we make that picture the episode cover art?
It is not a good picture of me.
Okay. We'll just use naked Toby Young.
That's not the shirt's fault. The shirt's great.
Yeah, we'll Photoshop Toby Young's face over your face. It's fine.
Or just send Toby Young a shirt and wait for a couple of weeks. I'm sure he'll wear it.
He'll still take a picture like Winnie the Pooh, no pants, no underwear, just the shirt, being like, oops. Oh no. What have I summoned into being? All right. We've done enough nattering. So from our family to your family, thank you very much for listening. Check us out on the Patreon on Thursday. You know what it is. Theme song, Here We Go by Ginseng. More than ever, listen to it early, listen to it often. Later.
Bye.
Bye.